All right, today is September 8th. This is the FMDiSC user group meeting. It's been a little bit of a rough start, so I apologize to everybody for the URL confusion. We've got a great lineup today. So we're going to start off with Ian Jempson, who's been working in the AI space for a long time. So he's sort of got a foot on each canoe here. He's worked in the AI space, and he's a longtime FileMaker developer. I've seen him present a bunch of times over at FMDiSC in the EU. He's always got interesting things to say, really thoughtful guy, and has a fresh perspective on most things that he has chosen to dabble in. And then after that, we're going to have the sort of news of the weird, as it were, the tech news roundup. And we're going to do a short breakout room session today. We'll just do a single breakout session, and then we're going to cede the rest of the time to Claris. So I see we have Rick here. I don't know if Giuliano is going to be joining us, but is he?
He was, but he is sick of yesterday and still today. So you're gonna have to suffer with me.
So you have his proxy. Excellent.
I have his proxy.
And then after that, it's going to be sort of a under the hood / ask me anything with Clay and Wade, correct? All right. So that's our lineup. And Ian, why don't you take it away?
And everybody, just a reminder, everybody mute yourself. And if you don't need video, that helps too.
Yeah, please mute.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, you're all good.
Yes.
Great. Yes.
Cool. Right. Okay. Thanks very much for having me. And thanks also to Chris for tidying up the title of my my session, which is he made it a bit more PG than it was for the session I gave in Berlin. But essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the same presentation that I gave in Berlin at .fmp with a few minor updates. This whole space is moving quite quickly. So some of the stuff that I suggested was probably going to happen actually has happened quite quickly. So it's a really, really interesting kind of space. So basically, Satya Nadella said this, that developer conferences are special places to be when platform shifts are in the air. And it feels very much like a major platform shift is in the air. To me, this feels like a change. AI feels like a change on the order of magnitude of the personal computer, you know, that kind of magnitude of change. So really excited to be in this space at the moment. Tell you a bit about myself. I grew up in Canada on a farm, but I currently live in central London, like really central London. We're about a 10-minute walk from the river, just south of the Tate Modern Gallery. I'm overly fond of German cars, much to my bank account's dismay. I've been working with FileMaker since version 3, and I guess I started working with it really heavily in Canada when I worked for a company that had an educational product. It had about 20,000 users. So I basically got my first professional experience with it was with a really large user base on a commercial product. A few years ago, I was working as a software architect for a large marketing agency, and I decided to go back to school, do an MBA, which I finished in 2020. My dissertation was on the topic of AI and what does it mean for business strategy. After I finished that, I started my company, and basically what we're doing is we're working on building a product that extracts insights from meeting recordings, and that, all going well, is going to finally be released in Antwerp at the Engage You conference there. All going well, we'll see. Egbert at .fmp always talked about embracing the chaos. So this was the pre-chaos agenda, expecting that things are going to change quite a bit as the talk went on, based on the questions from people. So what we're going to do is have a look at kind of what are large language models, sort of where are we now? Where are we going? Integrating this with Claris and FileMaker Pro, and then there's sort of an elephant in the room that also probably should be mentioned. So initially I was torn on whether this should be a business talk or a technical talk, and it kind of spans the two to an extent, because there's some really interesting aspects in both. Some of the things that I'm going to describe here are not, it's a little bit like your first university calculus course. Some of the things I'm going to tell you are not strictly 100% true, but what they are is they're kind of pretty good mental models or frameworks that give you a useful perspective from which to view this stuff, even if it's, you know, some of the detail is not exactly right. So just wanted to warn you about that. So OpenAI provides a large language model, and that underpins ChatGPT, and many others also exist, particularly now. We've got Anthropic has just released Claude in beta, which actually, from my testing, actually, for some of the stuff I'm doing, looks like it's actually better than ChatGPT as a chat model, depending on what you're doing. And it's really important to make the distinction that ChatGPT is a chat product built on top of a large language model. And you often hear people using that interchangeably, but they are different things, and it's easy to confuse them. So the large language model is built on top of a neural network. So that's going to be, I'm not sure exactly what OpenAI has built theirs on, whether it's TensorFlow or Keras or whichever other neural network that they built it on. But that's what they've done. GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And interestingly enough, this was invented by Google. And so Google has been quite upset over the last 6 months or so, because basically something they've invented has been used by other people to do all kinds of amazing things. And you're probably not too interested in this, but this is what the transformer model looks like underneath. And this came from a paper called Attention is All You Need. And it was just simply a different kind of architecture of building the neural network. And once this paper was out in the wild, you can see that all the people from Google Research, as well as some from U of T in Toronto. Once the paper was out in the wild, then at that point, virtually anybody who had access to sufficient computing resource was able to apply this and build their own models. The thing is that it's an immense amount of data and computing resource required to do this. So, I mean, OpenAI has been very heavily funded. They spent incredible sums of money to build ChatGPT and the models they're using. Part of their relationship with Microsoft was about getting access to computing resource to do that. So if we look at from a slightly different perspective, what is a large language model? It's a probability distribution over sequences of words. So what it's really doing is, for a sentence, it's trying to predict what word might come next. And if you're interested in the details of what it's doing, Stephen Wolfram's written a really good little book called What is ChatGPT Doing and Why Does It Work? And he's saying what it's fundamentally trying to do is produce a reasonable continuation of whatever text it's given so far. So the reason that's one of the things that's not exactly 100% true, but it's close enough as a working model of what it's doing. So it tries to predict what the next word is going to be, and it does this over and over and over again. So we say once upon, mentally, as a person, you'd think once upon a time. And that essentially is what it's doing. It's looking at what word statistically is the most likely to come next in the sequence of words. And this is why it's able to produce really, really good looking and impressive text without actually understanding what it's doing or what's going on. behind the scenes. So there's no true understanding behind it. Now, it's also quite context sensitive. So when I said fourscore and in Berlin, all the Americans in the audience kind of had a mental model of what word is going to come next, fourscore and seven, whereas most of the European people had no clue what would logically come next. So these things are context sensitive. And so this very much depends on how the model was trained and what data the model was trained on. So this is one of the things we discussed actually, certainly with Heidi in Berlin, is that if some of the models, if a lot of the models are trained on data that's coming from websites and web forums that are frequented by programmers who tend to be sort of young white males who are very, very sure of themselves, the context that the models may produce kind of tends to, that's why you may see that reflected in what's coming out. That's why you see incredibly plausible sounding answers, tremendously plausible sounding and highly, highly confident answers coming from these models that are frequently quite wrong. So that's kind of why that's happening to an extent. So it's a model of reality, but it's only a model. They're statistical models, so they produce text that plausibly matches the input, highly confident and plausible. They're trained up to a specific date, and they cannot answer questions of data after that date. So they can't answer a question that is after that point. The models are prone to hallucinations, and I'll come to a couple of probably fairly pertinent examples in a moment of that. They're really not great with factual information. And if you want to use your own data, you need to do some work to get your data fed into the system in order to get answers about it. So just one second, it's going to close the window. We're fairly close to London Ambulance headquarters here, so it's sometimes a bit noisy. So yeah, so we've got additional techniques you needed to use your data. That's like I said. So before the talk, I actually was I was working on a FileMaker solution, and I wanted to know whether the currently open window was a card window or not. So I had ChatGPT open, so I just asked this question. I said, as a FileMaker developer, I'm writing a FileMaker script. Before I do something, I need to know whether the currently open window is a card window or not. And this is what it gave me, and I thought, wow, that's awesome. That's super detailed. Basically tells me a function I can use, gives me the possible return values for that function, and then gives me an example of how I can use that in a script, which I thought that's just awesome. And if we look at this in a little more detail, does anybody spot a minor problem with this?
No such.
There's no such function. Just a second, I've lost. Get window style is the correct FileMaker function, not get window type. So it basically it made that up. So that's an example of a hallucination that I thought was actually quite pertinent to a FileMaker conference. So I asked it about get window style, and here's what it told me. Gave me the different return values, all 5 of them. Actually, sorry, 0-based, so it gave me all 6 of them. And there's another minor problem here, that if we look at what ChatGPT said on the left and what Claris Help says on the right, there are only 4 possible return values, not 6 possible return values. So it's made up a couple of additional return values. So yeah, so Claris doesn't know about a modal dialogue or a regular document. So anyway, I found that quite interesting, a really interesting example. You probably all saw the news here this is a bit old now, but in May, where the lawyer apologized for the fake court citations, where he did not realize that ChatGPT could just make things up. So basically, it's kind of an asshole. It just makes stuff up and doesn't care. And the thing is, it's just as confident whether it actually knows the answer or not. There are a few techniques you can use around that basically you can include when you're prompting it to basically say things along the lines of, for example, if you don't know the answer, say, I do not know. Don't make things up. If you explicitly tell it that, it actually gets better. And there are a number of other techniques that can be used to minimize sort of the hallucination problem. So in part, that's coming from things like compression, the amount of data compression that's going on with the models. So what it's good for? What is it good for? Well, when it's good, it's really, really good. If you've got clear bounded areas of domain knowledge, and programming is one of these areas, like SQL, JavaScript, Python, it's just fantastic. So in this case, what we've now seen that wasn't there, we've got various coding. There are code-specific LLMs. There are also products, GitHub Copilot. There's a number of other products along those lines that can be really, really helpful for developers. McKinsey is estimating that tools like that will improve developer productivity by about 40%. That's based on numbers so far from people who've been using it so far. There are some issues that you need to be extremely careful now. You need to be even more careful about making sure you never, ever stick authentication tokens or passwords or usernames into your source code. Those need to be put into files that are excluded, that are protected by ignore files. And the same thing as Git has ignore file. Some of the coding models have ignore files as well. So they will not look into certain files. So basically, OpenAI has got the fastest growing user base ever. And if you look at sort of the Rogers model on the diffusion of innovation, what's happened is it's been a much quicker adoption than most people expected. One thing to add here, actually, this is Rogers' diffusion of innovation model. It's not the innovator's dilemma, whatever FileMaker says, Claris says, but they do suffer from the innovator's dilemma as well, but that's a different thing. This is actually possibly the more interesting page out of Rogers' model, but I won't go into all the detail on that because I could talk on that for ages. So they had over 1 million users in less than 5 days, just astonishing growth. And over 100 million users in 2 months, which is it's just incredible growth. But the problem is that basically Google, there was a Google internal strategy paper that got leaked. And essentially what Google was saying was that they're going to need a bigger moat, that there's no way for OpenAI to protect that user base and build a really sustainable business solely on the basis of the technology. The switching costs for this kind of thing are quite low. It's very easy for people to change from using OpenAI to another system. And the other thing that's happened there is that other well-resourced companies, Google, Meta, Apple is presumably working on this behind the scenes, so they're not talking about it, are going to do models as well. And Meta has now actually released Llama 2, which under very, very generous licensing terms, which is pretty much, very much, it's close to being on par with GPT-4 from OpenAI. So the other thing that actually Google said was that not only is OpenAI in trouble with this, but Google is in trouble. Basically, Google is saying they don't know how they're going to compete in this kind of market with these. So with Llama 2 from Meta, any company that's got less than 700 million customers can use it. So the number 700 million customers is presumably chosen to prohibit OpenAI, Apple, Google, and Twitter from using it. We've got Anthropic, who've just come out with Claude, currently in beta. I suggest looking at it, giving it a try. It's a free beta. If you're in the United States or the UK, you can use it. If you're in other countries, you can't. I presume Canada, you probably could. Hugging Face are doing a lot of hosted inference models, and we've now got a lot of open source and special purpose models. So Bloomberg have built an LLM for finance, which is for finance purposes is going to be infinitely better than using any other one. It's being Bloomberg, it's going to be quite expensive, I would imagine. But there's also now open source FinGPT, which is based on Llama, and we've got Code Llama, which is again another open source aimed at code. So the open source models, the special purpose models are going to be much more effective for those purposes than a general purpose model. And the open source models are catching up really, really fast. This actually diagram is now out of date. That if we had ChatGPT sort of showing it being kind of the standard, that you could see that the initial release of Llama was only 68% as good. 2 weeks later, it was 76% as good. And then a week after that, it was now 92%. So these models can catch up really, really fast once you're out in the wild. And there's been a few papers suggesting that models can learn from one another, which would further accelerate the learning. And actually, on that topic, the interesting thing is that GPT-4, while OpenAI were talking about it as if it was a specific single model, it actually isn't. It's a combination of a number of GPT 3.5 models working together. And once that architecture got known, then other people were thinking, well, we can do this with open source models as well. The problem with the open source models is that if you're going to host these things, like they use a lot of computing power. So yeah, so we've got Llama 2, which is probably the one from Meta. That's probably the best of the open source models. And a number of the tools in the ecosystem will work with Llama 2. And the ecosystem around the open source systems is it's exploding. So we've got Pinecone, Weaviate, Chroma, our vector databases, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. We've got LangChain, which is it's a Python library that does a lot of work with models, where what it can do is it can chain commands together to basically, the goal is what they're trying to do is to build something that could function as an agent. There's going to be a load of problems with that, but some of the things that it can do are really, really impressive, because with the models, we need to manage very, very carefully the number of tokens that we've got and how that works. And LangChain can abstract away a lot of those kinds of problems. And that's what I've been using. And yeah, do you really want to host your own model? And this gives an example of maybe why not. To work with these models realistically, you need GPUs. And Vince, at one point, you're asking me what was the big fuss about NVIDIA. And it's because NVIDIA produces these GPUs, and they're very expensive. This is kind of the bottom of the line, and it's £7,000, so over $10,000. And to build large models, you need quite a lot. You can see this one's got 40 gigabytes of RAM, and for a large model, that wouldn't be enough to build it or work on it. To give just a comparison, when I installed Llama 2 on my M1 MacBook Pro, I tried to do a summary of a 15-page PDF document, and even using the GPU on that, it just chugged away for about 25 minutes. So the level of computing required, the power to do some of these things is quite remarkable. And something like this GPU would be roughly 250 times as fast as my Mac for doing that kind of job. So that's why GPUs right now are very become very popular again after the collapse of the crypto bubble. Hosting on Amazon is going to be one of the things, because you can basically rent a GPU equipped computer from Amazon. It's going to be expensive, but apparently GPU pricing is sort of from 50 cents to $1.50 an hour on average, apparently. So hosting, if you do need to build your own model, or I should say fine tune an open source model to work with your own data, realistically doing it on Amazon with SageMaker is probably going to be one of the simpler ways to go. Alternatively, using a fully hosted service like OpenAI or Anthropic, while they can be expensive. The thing is, they abstract away all those problems. And so if I want to use my own data, then you're not really able to use a standalone model. And so you've got three basic approaches. My talk at Engage U in Antwerp in a couple of months is going to be going into kind of a deep dive on these into much more detail. So the three basic approaches are that you feed the data in prompts, and you've probably already done that to an extent. If people have played around with ChatGPT, you basically feed it in information, tell it things, and you'll very quickly find you run into issues with the number of tokens and the size limits on the number of tokens. Tokens are very roughly correspond to a word. It's not exactly, but that for the moment that's close enough. And I'll touch on that in a bit more detail in a moment. So the next approach is retrieval augmented generation, or RAG for short. And this is looking like the way that a lot of people are going. And this is what I've been doing, the product that I'm building. This is what we're doing. That essentially what we're doing is we're querying the data somewhere else. And then when we get a smaller chunk of data, we're passing that in to generate the output text. And that uses vector databases. So in my case, at the moment, I'm using Pinecone, which is a hosted vector database, to do that. And then the third approach is fine-tuning a model. And this uses transfer learning to retrain an existing model. Data quality and quantity are really important. And it's going to take some technical skills to do this. A lot of people who've got FileMaker databases, I hate to say it, have got really poor data quality. I'm sure we've all seen, all had clients who just really don't seem to care about the quality of their data. And if they want to take advantage of AI systems, that's going to come back and bite them. It is super important. With poor quality data, it's not going to be useful at all. So those are three basic approaches. OpenAI provides an API. The calls look a bit like this. I'm going to make the assumption here that everybody here knows how to use curl with FileMaker and how to talk to an API. But essentially, it's pretty straightforward. It's a simple API, actually, the completions API. We set the headers correctly. We pass in an OpenAI API key, sorry. And then the data, basically, we specify which model. We pass in the messages, and we specify the temperature. What the temperature is about is the temperature corresponds to a degree of randomness in the answer. And that ranges between 0 and 1. If you set the temperature to 0, it's going to give you kind of a straight down the line statistical, this is what it thinks should come next. So if you're querying your own data and passing in your own data for a query, you want the temperature to be really low. If you're, say, using ChatGPT for ideation or trying to come up with new product ideas, then you want the temperature a bit higher to get more randomness, to get more randomness in your answers. just going to give you a couple of quick examples here. One of the first things I did was actually to edit FileMaker database schema. So what I did was I used ChatGPT to generate an FM XML snippet, copied that to the clipboard with Monkey Bread plugin, and then I pasted it in. So essentially, the question I said, define a, this is super simple, but it gives you an idea of what it can do very roughly. So we're saying define a database schema, the table name should be contact information, should include that. And then what I'd done was I'd passed in sort of an example of what the FM XML schema looks like. And so if we just do this, do it, then you can, sorry, before .fmp, yours from ClickWorks recommended that don't run code live in your demos, just record it and do that. You'll see that one of the things is that ChatGPT actually can be fairly slow when talking to the API, when dealing with things that are fairly complex, like trying to generate the correct XML structure. So I'm just going to speed that up a bit, maybe a lot. And then basically we've just got sort of this XML snippet in the right format. You can paste it in, and basically it's generated FileMaker fields. So the next thing I did was to revise that a bit and basically say, well, I don't want to paste it in. I just want to talk to the OData API. So it's basically the same example. And I'll once I get through the slides, I'll show you the FileMaker file here so we can have a little bit of a look at it. But I'm also conscious of time, and I don't want to take your whole morning or afternoon. So, sorry, there was something there that just can find the right spot. I can't. Oh, but essentially, with OData, we're able to specify some of the auto-enter stuff on the table as well. So I thought that was kind of cool. This is a data extraction example. So what I did was I basically took screenshots of all the .fmp presentations. This isn't, I mean, to be honest, what I should have done is just scrape the web, but I wanted to use the FileMaker extract text from image functions. So I've done that. So this was the little video I did just to the trailer for my .fmp talk. It's fairly short, so I'll just let it run. This bit I've speeded up. I've speeded up a lot because it literally did take 5 minutes to do 20 records. The image conversion. Sorry. That slide's always a bit there. I'll just show the FileMaker file. Just bear with me a second. Sorry, this part of the talk is a little bit the chaos of. So what we've got here, as you can see, we've got an image, my FileMaker script. Basically, what we're doing is we take the image, we convert it to text, and let's go back here again. So we can take the text from the image, which is all in FileMaker. I pass it to ChatGPT, where I've asked it to extract the structured data, and I've given it the format that I want it in. I basically asked it, I give it an example of a JSON format, said extract this into JSON. I then basically had that in FileMaker. What we then did was then talk to OpenAI to get the word embeddings for the text, and then we stored the word embeddings on Pinecone. So this is kind of the data extraction and preparation side of how we would do this. So this is the retrieval augmented generation. That what we're doing is we're pre-processing the information to get the word embeddings. And then when we query the database, we kind of do the opposite. That what we do is we query the user, we're asking, take the query that we've got from the user, we get the word embedding from OpenAI. I then query my database in my vector database in Pinecone, and that gives me back the record keys in FileMaker. And so I can query the database in that way. So if I just go back to FileMaker, show you. So if I enter a query who talked about
Ian, could you zoom in on that a bit?
Yes. Just a second. Sorry about that. Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, we can't, looks like I can't zoom in on the, it's not the header, it's the navigation. Okay, so essentially if I query, what that does is it goes off, it converts my query into a word embedding, comes back, and it's found, well, I've asked it for 3 records, and you can see that Heidi's presentation on computer security and privacy is the closest match, with a match of 0.85 on the, and then the others are sort of quite a bit lower. I've only asked for 4 responses from that, but that sort of gives you just a sense of what that process is doing here. So in that case, we're taking the query, we then take our text, we pass it to get the embedding from OpenAI, and then we do, given that embedding, we then query the Pinecone vector database with that embedding. That the API of that returns the values, which in this case are the record keys in FileMaker, and then in FileMaker, I can find them however I want. So that's not like a full retrieval augmented generation, because I'm just returning the records and I'm not actually generating text on this end again, but I could do that. So everyone's probably wondering, what's this embedding thing? So the embedding it's a vector representation of an input. So if we've got a prompt, sorry, that's slides in the wrong spot. Basically what we do is we can pass in objects, which in this case are going to be text. This works with images as well. But you pass in text into an embedding model, and it gives you, for each of those objects, it gives you a vector, a series of numbers. And in this case, the embedding model that I used is around about, I think it's 1,532 dimensions for the vector. And if we kind of flatten those dimensions down to just 2 dimensions, we can visualize it like this. That what we've got is that you could say we've got these different sentences that would generate different embeddings, and on a graph they would sit in different places. So what we can do is semantically, the closeness of those vectors on the graph describes how close the concepts are. So a dog is walking past a field is pretty close to there is a dog running past the field, but far away from a little boy is walking. So essentially that's what we're doing. While this is simplified to 2 dimensions, it's not really possible to visualize what it looks like in 1500, but it's something quite similar. That what the vector database is doing is querying and finding what's closest in all those dimensions. So different models produce different embeddings. So you need to make sure that when you're generating those embeddings and querying that you use the same embeddings. In this case, I'd initially used the sentence transformer embeddings from Hugging Face, but currently it's using the OpenAI embeddings just simply because it was simpler to use. The OpenAI API is really simple to use. So that's what I used in this case. So semantic query. Sorry, so just go back to FileMaker for a second. And so you can see here, if we take this, that we've got the text that we generated, and if I look at what's the vector, that's the embedding for that chunk of text. So Pinecone is a special kind of database that is optimized for querying across a large number of dimensions of vectors and returning what's closest. It's got a fairly straightforward API, and so that's why I've used it in this case. This actually also, I'm going to go into a fair bit more detail on that at my my Antwerp presentation for Engage U. I will probably also apply to Engage in the States if they've asked. I'm not sure if they've asked yet for speakers. So one of the questions is this just another UI? The guys at the Nielsen Norman Group have done a lot of UI research are saying that this is the first new major paradigm change in user interface since the graphic user interface, which is kind of interesting. But one of the issues they raised is that they said that they think that about now we're talking in sort of the industrialized Western world. They're saying that I think about 40% of people cannot communicate well enough to actually get good, effective results from these systems. Because if you think about what I was talking about with the improvement in using LLMs for coding, that if the whole coding goes away to an extent, I mean, it won't entirely, but if to a large extent it gets replaced by large language models, we've still got the same problem of how do we express the requirements. And if 40% of people can't communicate well enough to express requirements, which, I mean, actually, we've all got clients who I'm sure have been dreadful at expressing their requirements. And that's where we often, as FileMaker developers, our skills tend to be more in extracting the gist of what are customers really trying to do, even more so than the development side. So I think that's an interesting aspect of it. So I don't really have any answers on that, but it's an interesting thing. And about that elephant actually is essentially that with the bar being lowered, the barrier of entry being lowered for coding, and coding being done by LLMs, I expect that the software industry is going to change out of all recognition in the next 10 years. But what happens to low code systems as a result of that? If the main advantage of low code systems is that they're less expensive to develop in because there's very little code, how does that competitiveness get affected by the fact that coding is no longer something that's expensive to do, if that should happen? So that's, again, I don't have an answer, but that was something I found quite interesting, an interesting question. And I think in the case of FileMaker and Claris, it's particularly true because it's not even a situation where the system generates code. We can't generate code in ChatGPT or in any of the other models and then paste it into FileMaker and just have it work straight away. because that's all managed by the user interface. So again, an interesting question. And this is Stephen Wolfram's book on this. And if you're interested further, I really, really recommend it. It's quite accessible. The only issue I've got with this book is that his code examples are all in the Wolfram language, which I don't have. So I wasn't able to try his code examples. So anyway, that basically is, that's it for my presentation. So thanks very much for listening. Really appreciate your time.
Great job, Ian. Thanks for doing that. I love that point you raised about, is this just a new UI for querying databases and things like that? And what impact will it have on the low-code space? I think those are both great questions. And
yeah, well, after Berlin, someone, one of the European developers asked me about, basically, could we do a chat interface to query their data warehouse? But when I looked into it further, there were a couple of issues. That first off, they didn't actually really have a data warehouse. So to be honest, building the data warehouse was the first step because we don't want to be running a load of poorly developed queries against a live operational FileMaker system that needs to be selling tickets for something at quite a rate. You want to do that against a database that's been optimized for that kind of querying. And then the other thing, this question came up actually in a course that I took, went back and took another course on managing organizational performance from one of the MBA professors. And the question was around developing a set of metrics that are aligned to a business's goals and strategic aims. And if people are randomly querying the database, do we end up moving back to the old situation we used to have, where everybody did their own Excel queries of databases, and what you ended up with was you'd sit down in the management meeting with 5 managers and you'd have 5 different sets of numbers which could not be reconciled because they're all done from different angles. So I'm curious whether that kind of problem might arise again with this kind of interface into data. Again, I don't have an answer, but it's something I was wondering about.
Vince has a question in the chat. Said when you started, you mentioned in .fmp that things have already happened faster, and he wants to know what specifically are those things that have already happened faster than
basically the development of the open source models happened really a lot faster than everyone expected. The really, really big one, though, was when Meta released the Llama 2 model with a really open licensing model. Most of the other models that people have released have been under commercial licenses, where you would have, if you wanted to use them commercially, you'd have to pay. What Meta has done is basically said, just take it, go use it. You don't have to pay us unless you've got more than 700 million users.
I have a question.
Sure.
You were talking about, well, who's shoveling the data into these large language models? You said something about the demographics of the programmers. Are they strictly using their own output? What data are they putting in there?
That's actually a really good question. And what they've essentially done is most of them have basically scraped the web to the greatest extent possible.
The web is a cesspit.
Yes.
So what is anyone taking action to make the models more inclusive, more equitable?
OpenAI actually are trying to be quite responsible about that. Anthropic, I'll just find their website. I think Anthropic have got that. That's kind of one of their core tenets. Just a second, I can just. I'm just going to find their website and. Can't type. Actually, I need to put my glasses on. Oh, man, getting old sucks. Old sucks.
I just pasted it in the chat.
Did you? Okay, thank you. Because I was just, what they're talking about are things like constitutional. You can see they've got a lot of references there to things like constitutional AI, looking at AI safety, and accountability. So it's this kind of stuff is very much an open question, and yeah, it's hard to so other questions. Nico is asking about what role does prompt engineering? Prompt engineering is of the three methods that I talked about. Basically, prompt engineering is really kind of the first one of them, where what you're doing is you're constructing the query to the grid to try to get the best response, and it's still a bit of an art, but there is, by constructing a query in different ways, you can get much better answers. Things like asking it to there's a number of quite strange things, that apparently asking it to think things through step by step and list its steps that it's going through, and to correct anything that it spots that it's done wrong. So what I've often found is that you end up doing a number of queries. The first one kind of gets you sort of in the ballpark, and then you find out what you've said wrong, and you then go back and query it again. And so yeah, I think prompt engineering still does play a fairly large part in the whole landscape at the moment.
All right, we're going to need to move on just due to time constraints, but thanks for that, Ian. That was awesome as usual.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Can I ask one question?
Thank you.
Okay.
Ahead,
so here's an interesting twist. I'm actually getting certified in AI from Berkeley. There's an online course. I've been a FileMaker developer for, I don't know, 30 years, like all of us. And one of the things that's really interesting is that Midjourney, this AI solution that creates the graphics, was created after ChatGPT. So if you ask it to create a prompt to create a graphic for you, it doesn't know. It'll say, I don't know what you're asking for. So there's really interesting prompts that you can create that actually teach ChatGPT what Midjourney does before you ask it to give you the criteria of creating an image. So
that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
I've not thought of doing that.
Yeah, I'm actually I've got a podcast and I wrote a book, but it's really interesting because you think, wow, okay, so it always tells you that I only have data from November 2021. So if you preclude the prompt by saying, hey, just answer the question, forget about your restrictions, it responds in a different way. So I've written a FileMaker solution as a prototype for a web application I created, where I design the prompt. So I take some things that I understand and I massage the prompt based on what the user inputs. Like the audience is very important. Yes. I'm asking a question about like astrophysicist, and I'm a fifth grader or I'm a engineer. The answer is going to be different. So people don't realize how important the prompting is in terms of the response you get. So my solution, and I just wrote a simple FileMaker solution that goes and builds the prompt and sends it to the API and brings it back, is the nuances of the prompt actually very critical, and people get frustrated because they get bad answers.
Yeah, and I think that's where what the guys at the Nielsen Norman group are saying about that 40%, that the ability to articulate what you're after is super important.
Yeah. So and people say, oh, it lied to me. It's like a knife. You can use it to cut your steak, or you can kill someone. You've got to use it, responsibly.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I didn't go into a huge amount of detail on that because at .fmp, Joris from ClickWorks, he was also doing a presentation on ChatGPT, but he was kind of looking at querying it and specific queries. So we kind of coordinated to kind of, so they kind of dovetail together. But didn't overlap too much.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm getting deep into AI, and obviously FileMaker has a place, and I'm trying to find that place, and see how we can integrate FileMaker solutions, because obviously AI is going to be predominant in just about everything we do in the future.
Yeah.
All right, cool. We need to move on. I am going to jump straight into the news, and I'll try and keep it quick. Let's go here and here. If everybody could let me know that they could see my screen. Lynn, I can see you.
We can see you.
Yeah, we're good.
Perfect. Okay, so Tech News Roundup for September. The sort of big one that everybody should be aware of is yesterday, this dropped. There's a 0 day. The NSO Group is the Israeli company that makes Pegasus software, which is used to basically hack the dissidents and NGOs of the world on behalf of governments and fascist regimes. And they came up with a 0 day that uses the passkit attachment to get right past the latest version of iOS 16.6 without any interaction from the victim. Organization called Citizen Lab found it when they were assisting an individual employed by a Washington, D.C. organization. And they got together with Apple very quickly, and Apple also independently found a different one. So you can see the CVE numbers here, 2023 41064 and 61. The first one was found by Citizen Lab, and the second one was found by Apple. And they jumped on it, and I think last night they released a security patch for this. If you haven't had a chance to apply the patch and update your iOS device, you can enable lockdown mode, and that defeats this hack. So I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar. If you have an iOS device, and I'm guessing 1 or 2 people here do, you should absolutely get this security patch. In the good news of the tech sphere, the FBI and a whole worldwide group of partners dismantled the Quackbot botnet. There were over 700,000 computers affected worldwide. These were used for delivering ransomware payloads and phishing attacks and all kinds of stuff like that. 200,000 of those computers were in the US, and they set it up so that they redirected the Quackbot traffic to FBI servers that had the infected machines download an uninstaller file and then basically inoculated them against reinfection. So it's pretty cool. It happened at the end of August. Huge operation, obviously, US, France, Germany, Netherlands, UK, et cetera, et cetera. But score one for the good guys for a change. And then this was just sort of AI tangential. Gannett, who publishes a lot of newspapers in the US, started doing an experiment thinking, hey, we don't need reporters anymore. Let's use AI to write local news articles. And so at the last day of August 31st, several high school sports reports written by the AI service called Lead AI. You can see some example text down here at the bottom. The Worthington Christian winning team mascot, losing team mascot, and stuff like that. So
they might have gotten away with it if they hadn't fired all their proofreaders as well.
Yes, go figure. So I mean, it looks like just a bad mail merge, but don't worry about your job just yet. For all of those of you who are hand-wringing about ChatGPT coming to take our coding jobs away, they're not quite ready. They're getting there, but they're not quite ready yet. And another good news item, dwell times. So when ransomware gets onto your network, it usually hangs out for a while and looks around and sort of identifies all your important servers and directory shares and things like that. In that time, it can hang out on your infrastructure from the point it enters to the time it's discovered is called the dwell time, where it's basically incognito undercover. And that time has been dropping over the last couple of years. So in 2022, it was 10 days. Now it's 8 days. And so what that means is that the security software that the blue teamers are coming up with is getting better and better and better at detecting ransomware, which gives you a better shot at defending yourself against it. So, I mean, they're still getting in there, but it's nice to know that they're being found quicker before they can possibly pull the trigger on doing something harmful. And I thought the key bullet point here, the last bullet point, remote desktop was used in 95% of intrusions. So for those of you who RDP into client software systems, beware. And then this is just something, this was sort of a, I don't know if I want to call it a tempest in a teapot, but, you know, Microsoft has a long history. They've introduced tons of applications, OSs, services that they've killed off. And, you know, I just have some quick stats here. There's a whole website called killedbymicrosoft.info. And so here's all the things they've killed off. And it generally hasn't caused that many ripples. Same with Google. Google's kind of notorious for introducing services, shooting them in the head. And everyone's like, yeah, that's Google for you. And so I was kind of struck when a post was made earlier in the week on the Claris community saying, hey, we've made a change on our roadmap. And so this is my little, you know, obviously very quick paraphrasing of it. And so Claris forks from just FileMaker to having FileMaker in the Claris platform as two separate things. And then there's some grumbling from the community, that's too confusing, change it back. And so Claris, of course, changes it back. And then it exploded in rage. It's like, what the heck is going on here? So people said, we're not happy with this. It's too confusing. Change it back. We change it back. And, you know, not to be fair, not everybody was crabbing about this, but there was a lot of tone on that community post. And I just thought, you know what, that's not sporting. So I just had to say something about that. I'm going to cut it off here just because time is of the essence and we're a bit behind schedule. And if everybody is okay with this, what I would like to do is forego the breakout and go straight into Claris. And to me, the meat of this next segment is, you know, getting to talk to the engineers who we rarely get to talk to and haven't spoken to in a while, things like DevCon, things like that. So if it's okay with everybody, if I could get some head nods, I don't need hands or
absolutely.
Like that. But if you guys are all good with that, I am not going to pause the recording, and we're just going to go straight to Mr. Rick Kalman.
Yes, go ahead.
You have the
Hi,
floor.
Rick.
Hello. So here's my understanding and by the way, Giuliano Iacabelli was going to join us, but he has been sick the last couple of days. So you have me, and I was going to be with him as well. My understanding is we're going to take about 20 minutes to answer any Q&A related to what the last bit that Chris just talked about, the forking of the Claris and the FileMaker platform, and any questions you have there. And then we are going to have both Clay Maeckel and Wade Yu, who are engineers, architects, the ones that know what's going on under the hood here as well. And so that'll be a great session. So how do you want to do this, Chris, as far as Q&A? Or
Rick, could you just do a quick synopsis of the pivot in the roadmap, just so you know, maybe
sure.
Not everybody's seen the community thread, and so
yeah, I'll do a real quick synopsis. It's easy for me to share the screen. Yeah, okay, let me do that. And I'm assuming you can see this.
We can.
Okay, so a real quick. A bit over a year ago, back in April, we began talking about this sort of forking of the Claris platform. And it had a number of what we call North Stars, and not lost on us that there is one North Star, not plural. But anyway, there were some basic principles about what we were doing, about trying to reduce friction for new adopters of the platform by introducing free across the board for the entire platform based on a Claris ID and giving access to a new property called Claris Studio. And then there were principles such as, you know, the single identity, so that it knew everything you had access to, that regardless of what part of our platform you use, Studio, Connect, or FileMaker, that you would be able to access the data in those systems. and we wouldn't break anything going forward, right? So we ended up with a Claris platform and a FileMaker platform and a lot of confusion. And essentially, the bottom line was there was a new file format from .fmp12 to .claris. There were certain limitations, for instance, only a Linux version of the server, not a Mac or Windows, no support for external authentication, and other things. Well, obviously that set up quite a barrier to adoption for something that was being introduced that was new. So as Chris said, we got a lot of feedback from partners in the community, and pivoted and decided we don't need a separate platform. All we need to do is make the existing platform communicate with the new stuff, and we'll be okay. What that does is eliminate almost all of the barriers to adopting the new properties, the enhancements to the overall Claris platform. And I'm talking about not the confused separate Claris platform, but we are Claris, and underneath Claris, there's a platform we offer that is built on top of FileMaker, which is the one you all know and love and been using for a long, long time, with some integration with Connect, which has been there for a few years, and then Studio, which is a new capability. That is the Claris platform. It'll be one thing. It'll be FileMaker 12. It will support every single thing, FMP12. It will support every single thing that FileMaker currently does, including external authentication, all the flavors of server, and the other limitations aren't there. Gives us a little bit more room to breathe as we build out the practical business use cases for the kinds of things that you can do with Studio. And so we then end up with this picture. And then you may also remember that when we launched FileMaker 2023, back in April, I believe it was, we also introduced a new script step in FileMaker that allowed you a little bit easier than some of the tricks that people were using to be able to trigger a flow from Claris Connect. We made that easier by putting a script step in there that took advantage of some of that. And when we launched 2023, we provided a free tier for Connect so that people could begin to take advantage of it. And we'll continue down that path of more and more integrating Connect and FileMaker. There's some enhancements coming soon that will allow you to not even have to go over to Connect in order to select your flows from within the interface. In the script workspace, you'll be able to select the flow from Connect. And we also are looking to do something very similar with Studio, in that we're close to being able to introduce Studio that will talk to the .fmp file format, and we'll give access to that for people that are current with 2023. So that's it in a nutshell. And then the rest of it, I think we can go with Q&A.
So the obvious question is, what happens to the files that have been converted into a .claris format?
Yeah, good question. So before we deprecate the separate platform, we will introduce a version of Claris Pro, which is the complementary version of FileMaker Pro that produced the .claris file format. And there'll be an affordance in there to save as .fmp12. It saved that file back to fmp12. And there's someone on the call here whose initials are CM, who I think did that work, so he could talk about it under the hood. But essentially, we'll make it possible for you to turn that back to a .fmp12 if nothing else should change. The other thing is we will change, if you are familiar with that, you could not use the platform without first logging in with Claris ID. When we have the version where FileMaker can talk directly to Studio, only the developer that's setting up the connection between FileMaker and Studio will need to have the Claris ID associated with that Studio account. but their end users won't have to. We'll just store a token and it will know how to connect. We'll get rid of that barrier as well, because Claris ID, especially removing from local IDs or external authentication, is a big lift if you have a number of customers. So. Other question?
Hey, Rick, from a product direction standpoint, there've been there's been a feeling periodically over the last few years that as FMI and Claris has moved new initiatives forward, that the classic FileMaker has not moved forward as fast as the new things have moved forward. And I'm wondering if there's a renewed conviction to look at FileMaker itself and say, hey, you know, here's some stuff that we haven't touched in a while, and we're gonna go back and bring those things up to snuff too.
Short, yes. So what we now see is, you know, here's how I look at it. There's the Claris platform, right? And after we get over the confusion of, you know, a fork Claris platform where it's just Claris and it provides a platform, and that platform does these things, and it is the FileMaker that you have known and loved for all of these years that continues to get enhancements. It's really the workhorse of the platform with some new capabilities, for instance, grafting in and fully incorporating the capabilities and advancing the capabilities of Claris Connect to be a great tool to connect the other things out there without having to do a lot of the heavy lifting of APIs. And we're introducing the custom connector ability for, if there's not a connector for it, build your own, right? We're just about to release that as well, and I think that will help a lot. And then, as I said, as we build out more and more use cases for the kinds of things that would be better suited or well suited for a tool like Studio. So rather than thinking of Claris Studio as something separate and maybe even a future replacement of FileMaker, it's just an enhancement to the existing platform. Nothing more than if I had added a feature, right? Like script triggers or external SQL data sources. So it's the platform is, you know, larger because now it's going to include Connect, which I contend should have always been a part of the FileMaker platform in the first place. But, you know, sometimes we learn things a little bit slower than others, but we do learn. We'll put that in there, making it fully integrated, and then you'll have the Studio capabilities. The platform still gets all of the attention that we need to give it. We are absolutely well aware of what's going on in the AI, ML, large language model space. We are absolutely looking at where those intersections are. We believe, interestingly, someone, or in the first presentation, there was a discussion about, you know, gosh, the model for FileMaker and can I use, you know, LLM to have it actually build something for me, and I can't get from here to there. It's probably going to be a whole heck of a lot easier for us to be able to say to Studio or Connect to be able to build something on the fly or by the spoken word or the typed word and manifest a form, right? I mean, it's like a layout. It's not a full-blown application, but it's the framework that we use there is going to lend itself more to those kinds of things. So I just have more things to play with within the platform. That's the way I see it. But the lifeblood of this franchise is built on FileMaker, and the vast majority of the revenue to this company comes from FileMaker. It's not lost on us. To leave FileMaker behind would be to end of life this company. That's not lost on us either. So it's in good hands. You've got a number of people here. I've been here a while, but I'm a newbie compared to Clay, who is, you know, thank God we's like the oracle, no pun intended, of FileMaker. Lucky to have him here. Other architects like Wade and Robert Halsey. We're still here. Anyway.
I have a question. Sorry, Steve.
Linton, do you mind if I follow up real quick? Or
sure.
Okay. Rick, that all sounds awesome. I mean, reducing the barrier to entry and making it all interoperable, like you guys have here. Super good news. But the stuff that I was talking about was not like, AI models and future, stuff that's just cropping up and bleeding edge stuff. I'm talking sort of back to basics, like the presentation surface of FileMaker hasn't been updated since certainly single-digit FileMaker versions. We can't do native controls. We can't do, I mean, go back to the very, very beginning of FileMaker, and one of its great strengths was just that you could make something that looked and worked great right out of the box because the native palettes were there to do that stuff. And we have to do tricks and workarounds to do that still, for stuff that hasn't been touched in a long time, or just features where, gosh, we've got 4 pieces of a puzzle that's really 7 pieces. Could we have the last 2? And I wish I had some examples off the cuff, but I'm sure.
Well, that was exactly my question, Steve.
Oh.
It was legacy features like, when was the last time they updated the import field or import data field dragger dialog? I mean, really, it's been since FileMaker 3. I think that there are legacy features
in 18?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's been updated.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
Maybe I'm using an older version, but it's just there seems to be some features that should have been touched but haven't been. The shiny new stuff is wonderful, but forgetting the old stuff is
So yeah, I'm just wondering, Rick, is that something that you guys have a renewed interest in, of looking at it and going, you know what, we're going to be here for a while. Let's fix the place up. Let's do some of these basics, or has that not gotten onto the boards yet?
Well, one, it depends on who you think you guys are, because I have never changed at all in that, and I've been here all along, and we have been advancing FileMaker all along the entire 19.x era. There was a ton of advancements in the platform, but with finite resources and much to do, and also with the innovator's dilemma that's always looming out there, and things like AI and ML, when large language models potentially being an inflection point of significance, there's a lot to pay attention to, and we've got a vast platform. I mean, I have literally received every single feature request that we have received since June of 2012, and I'm telling you, I'm sitting on 26,000. And besides a few things like people wanting native sync in the product or a FileMaker Go for Android, it's a schmear across a vast platform when you can do a few in a release, choosing which of those that I do. So I realize that you all have these things. The things that I'm looking at that are sorely missing are, one is, yes, the FileMaker platform is vast and it's powerful, but its interface is dated, understood. The other thing is, you guys need better tools for application lifecycle management. You're sort of on your own there, crafting your own things. Both of those we're well aware of. A number of other things as well. And we're doing as much as we can, but the platform's vast. A lot of what you're referring to, I like to talk about as developer quality of life stuff, and it's it may not be as much as completely blowing up like we did in FileMaker 12, I think it was, with the design surface in one fell swoop, but the things that you're struggling with day in and day out, and going, if they just did this, then it would be so much easier, and I could go on to something without spending time there. We've collected a number of those, curated them, prioritized them, and are trying to knock those ones off as well. So
that's
awesome. Hey, Rick, can I mention something?
Sure.
Yeah, something else. I mean, FileMaker straddles so many multiple worlds and stuff like that. I mean, you say you want native controls on there, but if you're printing out IRS forms, you don't want a native control showing up. Somebody has to go to like the American Kennel Club or going to the IRS and stuff like that. So you kind of still need your fixed point, hard non-shifting layouts, and then you do want your fancy GUI floating, fix changes to whatever size the screen happens to be or device you're using. So if you really want a preview of what the new design service for, and we've kind of come to the conclusion that we need two different design services, one for fixed, one for form-based, one mainly for printing or PDFs and stuff like that, and another version for input from devices where you're not dealing with paper or with forms. But if you want to kind of see the preview of it, is start using Studio. That's kind of the new surface, and you can kind of think of that as a beta of what we're looking at, and that's where that's where they're doing this iterative design, trying to find out what people want. I don't know if I don't think they're getting much feedback from you guys about that, what you like, what you don't like. This is your chance to actually decide what the new design surface of the FileMaker, or I guess the Claris product line, is going to be. And it's not necessarily going to be the replacement for the current one. Okay, you've provided a ton of feedback, but okay, I'm not on that team for Studio receiving that feedback. I'm not sure where that stuff comes in. I guess I'm not following those backlogs. And Connect is kind of like another way of how we'll be bringing more integration in. It's going to get tighter and tighter into FileMaker and Studio. The Connect product may actually disappear as a product line. It's going to just be features within how you move data in and out of Studio, and maybe you'll be able to directly access those connectors directly from the scripting engine inside FileMaker. You don't need to. So Connect is kind of going away. Well, the feature set is sticking around, but it's all coming together into the Claris world, I guess, and being merged in. So talking about the future design, so you may want to start looking at these other things to see, if you want to see the direction that we're moving for some of this future functionality inside FileMaker.
Hey, Clay, that sounds really interesting, and I admit I have not had a chance to look at Studio yet, so I may be speaking from a point of ignorance here. But just to clarify, the kind of stuff that I'm talking about are some real basics. Like, you still can't have a pop-up menu that selects a value from a related field that's not fragile and can break if you're using display second field. So if you got people's names, but you're putting a key into a field, and that person's name gets deleted, I mean, it breaks. It's ugly. It's horrible. We don't have basic radio buttons that look like they belong in the last decade or so. I mean, real basic stuff like that.
Yeah, but those things don't print well at all and stuff like that. That's why I'm talking about we need two different worlds.
I'm not talking about printing at all. I'm talking about on screen.
Well, I know, but we do have customers that require that need forms that stay consistent.
Yeah.
So we're working on what the newer stuff, the prettier looking stuff. So you kind of look at Studio and see if you like how the UI looks there, and what the radio buttons. It has it has a kind of different value list mechanism over there too. I'm not sure whether we're going to use that or not. Now, you kind of have to divide, when you're looking at Studio, what the data model on the back end versus the GUI. So really, when I'm talking to look at Studio for the future of the front end, is look at how the GUI works, and like how value lists work over there, and whether you like how that works. Because they have value lists that are coming from related data also. Well, they don't call it related. They're using different terminology and stuff like that.
Okay, I'll take a look at that.
One of the problems is that right now there's not much convergence between those two GUIs, right? They're very, very different from one another, and they both have strengths, right? Like the fact that you can drop a field in, it'll kind of auto arrange things in the newer GUI is great. That could be a big time saver in the classic. Let's call it classic. I know it's a loaded word, but I'm going to use it for economy. In the classic interface, you can just, if you could rearrange things that way, that would be nice, when you want it. But the real strength of the classic GUI is that it's got this sort of pixel perfect way of designing things, which gives us the ability to deliver interfaces to our clients that are very unique and very much geared towards exactly what their needs are. Oh, can you drop a button here? Can you drop a button there? Can you, make this bigger, smaller, et cetera? It's really easy to do that stuff. And but some of those tools are really old. And I have to second what Steve was just saying about, trying to choose a value from a value list and get the ID and not just the value, but get the underlying ID. That is we have to jump through way too many hoops to do that still to this day, and it is brittle. And everybody has to struggle with that one on a daily basis, I think. So that's just one example of some of that kind of stuff. And I guess, but getting back to my main point, I don't want to take too much time here, but at one point in time, we had somebody who was in charge of all of that, right? That was in charge of UI as a whole. And I don't know that since she left that there ever has been anyone like that in that role in any big way. And I think that's a problem, honestly. I think we need somebody like that there. And especially someone that's accessible to all of us to talk about this topic.
I think I know a reasonable amount, and Rick Rick and Clay are both giving good representations. We're one company, we're bifurcating into two platforms. Those are going to have some migration between them and so forth, and we have to decide. I always use that Jerry Seinfeld bit for pain relief. You walk into the drugstore and you go, this is fast acting or this is long lasting. And you have to ask yourself, do I want to feel better now or later? So the feeling later part is, let's put as much effort as we can into the future of these platforms, which is Studio. And we've seen glimpses of modernization there. And how much effort, what's the return on investment in terms of piling a lot of new surface and design enhancements into a 30-year-old platform and so forth. So I think that's a tough one. My question to you gentlemen is really about the platform. So, obviously we've got the platform, the FileMaker platform, legacy, all the money comes from there, et cetera. But for a dozen years, you guys have slowly watched, basically workgroup databases getting replaced by the no-code, low-code platforms and so forth. So on the low end, and the other thing too, Claris tends to focus, I was raising my hand about 3 years ago talking about the various personas, the people who buy FileMaker. And there's that problem solver, which is really that high-end, sort of in-house developer or external consultant. And you guys have targeted the platform for them, subject matter expert, knowledge worker, Bob the Boat Builder. You guys have always targeted that person. There's also the super low end, which is where you guys are losing a lot. And for the last dozen years, you guys have lost a ton of market share to the Airtables, the Smart Sheets, the Track Via, all those low offerings on the low code side of things, not or the no code side of things, if you want to think about that. And then there's also that middle tier where the Power Apps and the Mendix and the OutSystems and Betty Blocks and all those guys that are coming in from a little more robust area. My question is, you guys have these two platforms. Is there anything to keep you from significantly going hard on Studio, going, hey, we can get those spreadsheet people into the cloud and we can continue to build this robust FileMaker ecosystem with the obvious opportunity of doing that merge piece down the road. Now you've got potentially two separate revenue streams coming in. You got the good solid money of everybody in this room, but you can also start to attract those people that you're not getting at all. You're not going to get them if the path is through FileMaker Pro and desktops and all that sort of stuff. You might get them if Studio really is on a par value with what's going on in Airtable and some of these web platforms. So is there a possibility of going, we've got Oregon and we've got St. Louis, and we can eventually build a trail between them, but they're both sort of good communities to establish yourself with right now. So questions about that?
Yeah, I think, Dave, absolutely. This is certainly going through my mind for sure here, because I look at what Studio represents, the framework it was done in, the fact that it's cloud-born, the modern interface there, certainly doesn't have the power yet. Let's go back to before FileMaker was relational, right? Think about it's closer to that kind of thing currently. And then you take Connect, right? Especially with the advent of being able to create your own custom connectors that we're right on the cusp of. Those two things alone especially as Clay alluded to, when the concept of Connect just disappears into the platform, you can leverage it in FileMaker, you can leverage it in Studio to do the kinds of things you need to use Connect for, right? And those two things alone, Studio and Connect, for that initial Bob the Boat builder, or that, you know, that person who's technically savvy and not afraid of technology, they're motivated, they got a problem to solve, and they can come in through there, a lot less of a burden learning curve. It's already deployed. It happens to be sitting on top of a very powerful, mature platform that does have a learning curve, but very powerful. And there happens to be 1,500 people in the world who know how to make that thing sing. So you bring in the people through the easy thing and go, oh, and by the way, do you realize what this sucker is sitting on? Now you got the full suite. I do believe, as Clay was sort of alluding to, that what you'll see, and we're certainly already beginning to play with that, and we'll probably begin dropping it into ETS in the next few months, is leveraging. I mean, what if we could have a layout that was essentially all of the modern studio stuff projected in FileMaker, and with all of the Chrome and everything? It's not throwing Studio into a web viewer trick. It is literally combining those two, or even more interesting, I've already seen prototypes of this, taking something that Studio does and then revealing it as another object in FileMaker, and all of a sudden being able to get signature capture in FileMaker Pro, because Studio already has it, right? And so as we begin to meld these things, and Clay is also right, is, you know, our Achilles heel is our success. Is one, we're in every industry, and we're not, I mean, there's a few that, you know, we stand out in, but people are using us for everything in the kitchen sink, all the way from, you know, needing to print pixel perfect forms, but the tyranny of that, right? It's like the power of it and the tyranny of it, right? So how do I not have to build a layout optimized for each size screen that I might have? Well, then, you know, there's ways to do that, and maybe you lose control, but that's okay, right? It depends on what you're trying to do. So I think we're just trying to get out of thinking about, oh, there's this product, there's that product, and there's this product, and say, you know, that's FileMaker, and this is Studio, and that's Connect. It's just the Claris platform that does these things. Studio and Connect are enhancements to the platform. Nothing, but they're not a thing in and of themselves. I think that was the path we went down.
What you just said right there, and this is the interesting thing for me, FileMaker is a, you know, largely shrinking platform in a much more competitive environment. There's not a lot of desktop database models around to even, it's us and Access that are left standing. Paradox Approach, 4D, they're all gone, you know,
yep.
for that. So my whole point is, you guys have this new sibling that's coming out that can right now, to some extent, compete with those low-end offerings that are out there. You are not going, hey, let's right now go after Google Docs, let's go after Airtable, let's go after Smartsheet, let's go after these, because we can win on that front. But the minute you say, no, it has to be part of the file, I mean, I'm not saying you divorce it from FileMaker. I'm saying let it stand on its own legs, build a bridge between them. Eventually, give yourself time so you've got that robust, stodgy, old, big, giant, complex IRS form printing platform on one side, and you've got this newfangled one that soccer moms can use to put together quick little databases that they can share with people. That right there gets you a new form of customer and some new money coming in that doesn't have to get burdened with 30 years of code and dependency structures and so forth. So that's the part to me. Same thing with Connect. You guys bought Connect. And instead of it being this, hey, let's go after Zapier and be this real standalone product that I don't care if you want to use it between Salesforce and MailChimp. You can. You guys have more and more kept folding it into the smallness of the FileMaker campus and going, hey, it's really part of FileMaker. And I'm going, no, it should play with FileMaker. But these things, if they can stand on their own, you have an opportunity to reach a much larger world.
Yep. No. I definitely agree with you, Dave. And the other thing is, and then layer in freemium, right? What is this going to do when we can offer the entire Claris platform, including FileMaker and Studio and Connect, as one cohesive platform with one center of gravity, not four consoles, and you can You can build stuff with it before you have to pay for it, right? Now we can get it into education. Now you can give it to your customers. Obviously we'll protect ourselves, but the combination of those things, right? The thing is we just can't boil the ocean all at once. And we got to get our ducks in a row. Obviously, the space has been radically evolving. I am well aware, and I think, Dave, you were the one that initially got me going down the path of, Rick, do you realize what's been going on here? Look at all this competition. I have Google Watches on all of that and all these technologies every single day, and I curate this for the company and point it out about what's going on because we are in high tech, right? It changes. I know people get angry. For instance, we did the Claris platform. We went back, and then as you started out this meeting today, and then Chris was surprised that people were angry. Well, people don't like change, right? They just don't like change. None of us do. The only problem is we happen to be in a field where it's nothing but change. Right. So, and the older we get, the more we get set in our ways. So, I have to fight that all the time, not to be perceived as the one that, oh yeah, Rick used to create FileMaker, back when, those kind of things. And so he can't possibly, it's like, no, it has nothing to do with age or the color of your hair. Right. It has to do with understanding the nature of what we're up against and that technology is we're always trying to catch it. I'm just trying to make sure that we're skating to where the puck's going to be, right? The old Wayne Gretzky thing is, if I chase where the puck is at, I will never catch it, and I will fall further and further behind. So, this is what we're attempting to do. It's not for the faint-hearted. I can tell you it's not easy. Easy is hard.
Yeah. I mean, there was a freemium, ETS, and, we've playing around with it, but licensing, I mean, this goes back years. I know Dominique kept trying to say, we're going to simplify licensing. And all we kept doing was keep adding new licensing models on top of existing licensing models. So there is a lot of discussions trying to figure out. I think that's one of the major problems. It's not really a technical problem. It's just is how we're sell things. And I mean, if we just had to worry about the US, it would actually be pretty easy, but things get complex as we start bringing in other countries and, how people won't do things and stuff like that. Now, like I was surprised when I went to Germany, I couldn't use a credit card in a restaurant. And then I go to like Sweden and I can't use cash anywhere there. So it's like, every country has all these different rules and how things are so different that trying to come up with something that works is unfortunately slows that down, but hopefully we can solve that soon because I heard Rick mention the freemium thing, and we're still, that still is a goal. We just haven't figured it all out yet and how it all works together. Which answers like the question about how does a soccer mom get access to play around with it? We know what we want to do or what the solution is. We just don't know how to do it yet.
Speaking of the freemium, it'd be great to get it into. What I'm finding is there's a lot of younger generations coming in that are, gravitate towards Airtable, and I'd love to see a heavy seeding of those groups with the freemium product.
Yeah, there are a lot of advantages to it, but there's also dangers with it also. So
I just want to chime in on the Airtable discussion. I mean, we were with a client for 10 plus years, and then they had some decision that was made that they were going to replace some part of the system that we ended up supporting with Airtable. I just actually heard today that they abandoned it. It didn't work out. I mean, sometimes things are nice and shiny when you start, but, down the road, there's all kinds of things that can get in your way, and there's challenges anywhere you look at it. Again, it's nice and shiny when you start off with something new, but give it a few years and then you'll see. So
I think I saw Wim's little comment here. I guess we're in just general Q&A now, I guess, at this point. But remember about caring about dev and prod version control and that stuff. Yeah, I know Studio doesn't have any of that stuff there right now. So as things merge, we're going to have that. But on that front, on the FileMaker side, at least I actually have a little Scrum team that I actually kind of control what they're working on, and this is where I guess we got some questions, from Tony about the underlying XML that's going back and forth on the clipboard, and so that team is going to be working on, we're bringing back the work into all the XML stuff that we were doing previously, and that poor upgrade tool has been setting in beta for 2 years now or something like that. So we are getting back into that. We're working on that to help you manage databases. Vince is pestering us every day with emails about things that he wants changed in the XML to make it better. I agree with about 2/3 of what he says. Is that high or low, Vince?
I guess it depends, but anyway, yeah, that's great.
It depends which thing you do.
Vince will take whatever he can get. He is nothing but tenacious. And good for you, Vince.
Yeah, and we like something that some of you guys are seeing on the ETS tool is that the ETS list is that we're working on a developer tool so that all those developer utilities that are in the FileMaker menu right now will be all in a command line tool. So all you guys that are trying to come up with these distribution chains for how you want to, create different files and encrypt them, do the encryption at rest stuff without having to do it automatically, and you want to send out different files to different people with different passkeys, you'll be able to automate all that stuff with this command line tool to do stuff like that. So we are definitely working on that back end. I like usual, I've never really been the front end person. That was like Christopher Kim and stuff like that. But pretty much all the front end people is running. Those people aren't here today. They're mainly all looking at Studio is where most of the the new UI design work, all that concentration is occurring over there. But we are Wade is working basically on the server, improving that, improving the performance on that side. We're going through and looking at a bunch of different crash logs. I don't know, we have 2 or 3 people that just are looking at crash logs coming in from customers, coming in from Apple, things that we're generating in some of our stress tests and stuff like that, trying to find out and work out all these bugs and try to get the low-level Draco engine to the same point that musing back on my past and stuff like that is like FileMaker Pro 6, we finally fixed the last HBAM bug in it when 7 came out. It's like that version of HBAM in there is like the most stable piece of code that I've ever seen running now at this point. But it took a number of years to get to that point with that engine, and now I think with Wade and the people that he's working with, they're trying to get the 7 the new Draco engine up to that same point too. I mean, there's a lot of work going into that, and actually improving the performance of the Draco engine. So we aren't. I mean, we've been going down a whole bunch of different branches of different issues that Claris is all looking at. We have the new UI with the studio stuff. We have the connectivity to other things with the Connect stuff. We have the database backend engine stuff. We have the developer stuff I'm mainly concentrating on recently, and then we have this whole licensing issue that a whole other part of the company is all trying to worry about. So we have, and we're not that big of a division inside Apple to do all these things, but we are all frantically working on this stuff, and we all have our backlogs now with our Jira tickets all in there, and we trying to organize them. And unfortunately, some of the stuff that you were asking earlier today just aren't on at the top of those backlogs with what they're going off. But we are trying to. It is all recorded. It's not all in a FileMaker database anymore. It's now all in this Jira system, and divided between the different teams. But we are going through them.
Hey, Clay. First of all, I really like that image of all of you over there frantically working on these backlogs. It's a really frenetic hallway picture. But you mentioned the developer tool, that it's a command line tool, and there are a number of tools that you guys have been rolling out over the last handful of years that are all powerful and command line tools. and I'm wondering, just for my own understanding, what is the mindset that these don't have GUIs to them, that they don't have a GUI that is easier to access and they require going to the command line? Is there a strategy behind that? Is it just what you just said, that all the front end people are over on the other team and it just doesn't get mind share over there? I'm just sort of curious.
There's actually, well, you see, other people are actually making money off this stuff. I mean, Otto. I mean, if you go with Todd Geist's Otto product, I mean, that's basically the data migration tool. That's a whole product line being sold based around a one command line tool that we released. There's other big developers like Kmar is using he's one of the ones who's been pushing this for this developer tool heavily. He uses the migration tool. And he doesn't even sell his product anywhere. I mean, he's pushing out FileMaker solutions to how many different schools? Rick, do you remember what
I don't remember the number, but it's essentially almost the entire educational infrastructure of the country of New Zealand. He is the big guy in New Zealand for the SIS.
So, and this is stuff where he doesn't need GUIs because he's not pushing these things out. He's not making these workflows. These tools are not for the standalone mom and pop store and stuff like that. This is for the people that are pushing either solutions out to a bunch of different customers of theirs, or they're making standalone products that they want to push out and sell as standalone products. We see, I mean, even in the ETS, the feedback forums right now, we're in a discussion of one of the commands that is in the developer utilities that did not make it into the command line tool, which they're saying, well, we really need that in the command line tool. So right now I'm in a discussion over there on those lists, trying to decide a way to do it that isn't as complex of what the GUI can do, and a way to, we're trying to drill down to what do people actually need that we can actually implement in the command line tool, which how do you link this file to this file to this file to this file, and then change this name and this updates that and that. In the GUI you can do all that because you can spend 20 minutes setting up this whole chain, but in the command line tool you don't want a 14-page command line argument list to the tool. So I mean this tool is not for the mom and pop. This is for the big end.
Clay, philosophically, as from a product manager's point of view, here's what I'd say about that question about the command line tools, because it's a good one. You have to remember there was a time when FileMaker was pretty much an island unto itself. And believe it or not, I had to fight Dominique directly in order to put the REST API in the product. But I won after I stopped arguing with the president of the company, because I realized I wasn't going to win that time in the room. We won. Thank God we did that, right? So here's how I see this: is we no longer want to do every single thing in the platform. We also want to allow you guys to be able to add value to it without having to wait for us. So by giving you things like this, then proof guys can create things like Otto and Automatic, or Vince can create a kick-ass Inspector Pro that takes advantage of these things. And while we aspire to not having people have to do that, we also want you guys to be able to add value to the platform and to grow your business and make money off of it and all that stuff as well. So in a way, it's like open source. So originally it was like this. It's like, what? A command line? No, right? But you guys are pretty damn talented. That's all I got to say. I mean, we did something that's in ETS right now that I had one of our top partners come back and said, oh my God, do you realize that now I can do this with that? And it's never lost on me that it's always the small little things that we give you guys, and you blow us away with what you're doing with it. I think that was something that David McKee just dropped in because he had an idea, and I just said, okay, let's do it, and boom, there it is. And then we're iterating already in ETS. So anyway, philosophically, we've just gone from more of an open source mentality, but obviously we understand it's not for everybody. That's the difference between, sure, all you guys who know how to do this, can do your endpoints and your JSON and your APIs and hook things up. Or if you can't do that or don't want to spend time doing that, use Claris Connect. And then if Claris Connect doesn't have a connector for it, when the new connector, custom connector kit comes out, either build your own, or one of the talented FileMaker developers in the community will build one and either give it to you or sell it to you, right? And so that's sort of the from my point of view, philosophically, how I think about it.
Thanks.
Rick, is there any kind of an effort going on right now towards creating more depth in the existing connectors in Claris Connect, adding more of the functions that may be missing out of some of those as they exist today?
Yes, but also I'll be interested in any specific things that you guys want, send it our way. I'll make sure it gets to the people. But let's just put it this way. The advent of putting that script step into FileMaker 2013 to be able to call Connect and making Connect free has opened up an entire new era of investments on the Connect side to make it far more powerful. But as Clay said, our intent is for Connect to disappear as a separate thing. Although I also, to Dave's point, I do agree, is if that thing could live separately and has utility in and of itself, then don't be crazy, right? So we'll take advantage or look at those things and decide what makes the most sense. But I look at it and go, Connect is finally getting the love it deserved, because when I got up on stage, gosh, 5 years ago with Andy LaCates, and we talked about the workplace innovation platform. If you remember that column at the end of emerging technologies, it begged for Connect. We went out and got Connect, but then we unwisely, in my opinion, made the decision to sell it as a separate product. It should have just been part of the FileMaker platform. But we're there now, right? And got some very talented product managers and engineers sitting behind that thing as well. So you're just beginning to see that thing. But ironically, I think it'll disappear. It'll just be capabilities of the product. It won't care. It's a studio, it's going to take advantage of it. If it's FileMaker, it's going to take advantage of it.
Right? I have a couple of questions for Wade. One is that, the recent upscaling of WebDirect's capability with 1,000 users is a nice step in the right direction. But I was curious if there are other things on the sort of longer term plan, like clustering, load balancing, failover, things like that you'd want to have sitting in a cloud, to be able to really push it. And then I guess during you guys under the hood session, there was some hinting at there were a number of server performance improvements in the last go round, but there wasn't a whole lot of detail around that. And so if you have any light that you could shed on more specifics to the server performance improvements, that would be great.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Fine.
Okay. So, good question. Actually, there are several questions. So how about I think there are a lot of people asking about performance. So like Clay say, actually, we did quite a lot of performance. So maybe I share some couple of detail with you. So in one area is we try to leverage the hardware accelerators. For example, we use the advanced bit manipulation, so-called AMB from Intel. And actually, ARM also support this kind of feature. So for bitwise operation, like a bitwise and bitwise OR, exclusive OR, or counter ones. So whenever the chip is supported, we try to use the new API, the hardware accelerator, instead of the old way to do that. So that depends on the solution. So you might see some good improvement. You might see just a tiny improvement. And also you might know we started to use the lock-free stack and lock-free queue for some time. Again, that's also hardware accelerator. So particularly in the 20.1 release, when you have a script step, you have a lot of the parameter list. So we use a lock-free queue to manage it. And the same thing on the web direct, the UI actions, we also use the lock-free queue to manage it. Instead of say, we use the STD library queue and the plus mutex. So in a way, technically speaking, the saving is more on the mutex and contention. And another thing we did improvement is in the 19.4 Pro and Go, we enhance the transaction. So when the client commit a transaction to server, or we send additional information about the files being involved. So in the way, the FileMaker server will be able to figure out this file set grouping. So the good thing about that is later on in the backup. So the FileMaker server will only need to pause those files that have a transaction involved. It doesn't need to pause all the files. So this one, technically speaking, it will help both backup and also transaction system. And this, however, to take advantage of that one, you need to enable the parallel backup option, and which you can do that from the FileMaker admin console, the UI, or you can use the admin API to enable it, or you can use the CLI command option. And another area we continue improving is the cache is some of the member of the FileMaker database catalog. Like Clay mentioned about, the catalog actually heavily used in the Giuliano database engine and FM engine. And particularly to say like every time when users sign in doing the authentication, we need to check the guest account enable disable status and check whether it's a guest account. So this one we cache it so that when the user doing authentication in server, we don't need to lock the catalog. We don't need to check the database again, just check the cache flag. And in case if admin change it, then we will invalidate the cache. But normally when admin to change this catalog member actually in production system, that happens, but it's quite rare compared to normal operation. And in the FileMaker script engine side, we make several improvements. One of them is we increase the database cache size from 64 megabyte to 256 megabyte. So this will help for people running a lot of P-source activity happening on the FileMaker script engine side. And we also increase the sending thread pool size from 50 to 100. So the sending thread pool size actually is for all the FileMaker server processes, not only for the script engine. Actually, this will help the database server process quite a lot if your server really under a lot of overloading. So, and another thing is this one is a max size. So for example, if your server have a very light loading, say only serve 10 concurrent sections, so it will not use 100, it will just use 10. And so the max actually is kind of the top threshold. However, the cache size that I mentioned before, that one is when the process started, it will allocate 256 database cache. So that one, even you very light, it still have 256. So that's kind of difference. And another end is if you use our Ubuntu, our server on Ubuntu, the Ubuntu by default using HTTP2. Which is better than HTTP 1.1. Now, on Mac side, the Mac by default, Apache still HTTP 1.1, and we have a script. So if you want, say, if you want to run the HTTP 2, you can run the script and you switch to the HTTP 2, particularly if you don't run the PHP, because PHP have a thread safety issue with HTTP 2 in Apache implementation. And on web direct part, we also did quite a lot of improvement. One of them is the four-layer cache system for the CSS layout. And we also changed the notification handling to asynchronous, non-blocking mode from the original synchronous mode. So that's a kind of rough, and we upgrade, as you know, we upgrade to a Java 17. So that's roughly kind of for the performance improvement. I think before I go to other question, any question in this topic?
Do you have anything to share in terms of improved server core utilization? My recollection is that, the last time I heard much on this topic is that you were just sort of leaning on Windows, and however the Windows server operating system would utilize multiple cores, you just piggybacked off of that. Do you have anything that is sort of more directly optimized for core resource use?
Well, I mean, the stuff he was talking about, using the lock-free queues allows the operating system to manage cores better and stuff like that. We aren't putting in these hard blocks on mutexes and stuff like that. So a lot of the stuff he's talking about allows that. I mean, we're not going to write a core. We're not going to write a thread scheduler. I mean, the operating systems already need to do that. What a lot of the stuff Wade was talking about was releasing the number of impediments to allowing the scheduler to do its work, like doing more, getting rid of the synchronous stuff, which is basically locking threads down when things are waiting, by moving to a more asynchronous model that allows more threads to run at the same time. So, yeah, that kind of answers that part.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. I think the most improvement you see the use more cores, probably we kind of improve in the 19.1, 19.2 time frame. When you see I think you probably know we switch to sharing lock instead of mutex or page level locking. That one, when you run the stress test, you probably see we use a lot more cores than before. Put this way, if you do see a case, we don't use as much cores, please let us know the thing we can check.
Okay, thanks. I don't want to hog the session here, so somebody else.
I saw one question that went by talking about the admin APIs and how inconsistent they are, and yes, we do know about that. We actually have a new employee that is actually going through and is trying to make them all consistent. He's bringing over stuff. Even the cloud admin API is different than the on-prem admin API. He's trying to, unify all that stuff. So yes, we are we know that all our admin APIs are a bit of a mess, and what can be done by the command line tool versus what can be done by the admin tool versus what can be done by the GUI. So yeah, we do know about that, and we have at least one person that's looking at this pretty heavily. Well, actually two, I guess, because the GUI is a different person. So we do know about those admin APIs, and there are people actively working on that stuff now.
As long as you're not going for the lowest common denominator, I'd be happy with that.
Well, yeah, no, we're not removing features from the, so you can run the data migration tool from the cloud admin API, but you can't do it from the on-prem admin API. I mean, that always seems stupid to me. So he's fixing that. So we're going to be bringing things that are missing from one API to the other APIs, and my goal is that this is where like a command, like the admin command line tool should probably, all it should do is make admin API calls right now. Right now, it has a different API that it can do some administration stuff. And my goal for that team is that that you could rewrite the admin API tool, except for some of the launching and starting and stopping stuff. But all those other commands should be basically all things that you can do exactly from the admin API too, and that it's all consistent between all those three things, and that the front ends would use the admin API also. So, you know, you fix it in one place and it's used everywhere. Sorry, Wade, stealing some of your stuff.
Okay. No, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, and I think the couple of questions, I only answer one, and I think another one related to the 1,000 user. In our testing, actually the thing is, if you see the demo that we presented, we use the Docker. So we have a secondary server running on Docker, and particularly we try run the Docker actually can run on Ubuntu, or you can use the Docker desktop run on Windows or Mac. And in a way, we use the Ubuntu. One reason is we take advantage of the Mac VLAN support. So on a Ubuntu box, Ubuntu OS, actually you can run three to four Dockers in one VM, and as long as the hardware and network are capable, so that will help people help admin manage the service. And we use basically we disable the legacy MWP routing. Some of you probably used that before. So MWP routing, the load balancer actually cannot perform as we expect. So in the way we use the Nginx, and roughly there are two different Nginx. There is the open source one. There is the Nginx Plus, and the FileMaker Web Direct need the cookie to sticky option to the section. So if you use an Nginx Plus, you can you need to turn on the sticky section, and so to that Web Direct can keep track of its section. And if you use the open source one, the free version, and you can use the IP hash. So in a way, if say your customer, the remote IP, they are all unique. The IP hash might perform. It probably not as good as the plus one with sticky section, but as long as each IP they are separate, that probably can work. So we do have an engineering log on this topic with quite a lot of details. Yeah. So in the put this way, that's what we have today. I think there's some people asking about the Kubernetes. So at this point, we don't have that yet. And for about the next topic, next question I think is about the fault tolerance clustering, and that's a good question. We know that this consistency of database is very important. That's one of the reasons we have this persistent cache option. So the persistent cache actually is to protect your committed transaction. And when the server crashed or got killed, and some of them still in the flash queue, so we use a persistent cache to cache it. Yeah. And so when the server restart, when we find out the database file is not in consistent state, we will try to recover them from persistent cache. And persistent cache, I think some people are asking about, say, the performance impact. That one, technically speaking, depends. The persistent cache, because we kind of do architecture-wise. So first, we separate the main file cache and the temp file cache. Yeah. Think about this: when the server crashes, the temp file cache actually we don't care. You don't care. But the main file cache we care. Especially we care about 30 pages. They are still in the flash queue. They are committed transaction, but they haven't saved into your main file yet. So that part we care. And in the way we also doing this, we instead of say everybody share one flash queue, we have each file flash by itself. So in our testing, in some cases, when you turn on persistent cache, actually it could be faster than the old way. However, later we found the reason I mentioned in under hood some performance issue. We found out if say you set the database server cache size very big, say you set it 4 GB or bigger, there is a performance issue. But no, in normal case, I think most people don't set the database server size that big. So in a way, we are fixing it. So for the next release, that will be gone. So I will suggest the try out the persistent cache, and if you do find any problem, please let us know. And say if you want to cluster or use a different file, I think a couple years ago we have a standby server. Unfortunately, standby server doesn't live up to the expectation. So we are thinking definitely we are thinking about it. Yeah. So hopefully that's answer the question.
See if there's any other things I see offhand that see, Rick sent me some things from someone else who was
from Tony White.
Yeah. Well, okay, yeah, I talked about the XML. So this XML work, I mean, talking about trying to normalize everything too. There's like, you know, a couple different flavors of XML floating around with the old DDR, and then there was the new Save as XML, and then there was like an intermediate bit version that's on the clipboard that's not even related to those two sometimes. So now that, well, one of the problems is that we had to go through and update the base XML engine that we're using underneath. We were using this thing called Xerxes and Xenon, which was ancient code that no one's been updating, and some people were refusing to use FileMaker because it's on some list of being too old and not supported and stuff like that. So we're moving up to basically the same version of the XML engine that Apple includes with the OS. I think it comes with and comes on Ubuntu. I think we're using the version that comes with Ubuntu, and then on Windows we have I think Windows is actually using a slightly newer version than either the Mac OS or Ubuntu is using, but at least this is something that's been written in the last 5 years or so instead of being 20-year-old code. But now that we've moved up to that, we can move forward with some more of the XML work, so we don't have to go through all these hoops that we had to go in the background to continue adding more features to that. So we are trying to consolidate that more. I don't think we're never really, well, eventually what you see on the clipboard should be able to be like the same stuff that you would be able to send to the input into the upgrade tool, which has unfortunately not been, hasn't gotten much love in the last few years. And we'll get back to using that stuff too. So, so that should be almost like another whole unified area, just much like how the admin API kind of fragmented, the XML was fragmenting also.
Hey, Clay, thank you for taking the question. And first off, I like what I'm hearing. Obviously, you all are doing a tremendous a number of things across a lot of platform. The question that I had on the XML, it comes up in the community conversations. There's a lot of developers who are, code generating. They're generating the underlying XML. They're using, let's just say, base elements to convert the XML to what I call FM clipboard. So one of the questions, some people are a little bit afraid maybe to use it. Maybe there's an error in the XML that they're converting. So it's a bit of an under the hood question. Do you all have like the routine when somebody pastes the clipboard? I'm assuming you've got some code that just makes sure that it's solid, that it's not going to cause any problems. I mean, we've been using it for 10 years. We haven't had any problems.
Yeah.
But that's be good to hear it from the source.
Yeah, well, we don't really do any validation of the XML itself. It's the classes underneath it that they talk to. So you've been hearing the term catalogs and members. So all the schema, whether it's like layouts or database, field definitions and stuff like that, they're all stored in these things called catalogs. And then there's objects in these catalogs called members. And actually, if you look at the XML, you can kind of see how this works here.
Sure.
So each of those classes, so the XML is basically read, and then it's just calling the actual functions on each of those member classes to say, update the name, turn on this flag and stuff like that. So those actual C++ APIs in Draco do all the validation on, you can't pass in bad parameters. So you'll get an error if you try to set a name longer than 100 characters. You'll get an error on it won't let you set that because the actual C++ API is going to return an error. Now, whether we generate a nice error message coming back, that may be the bigger problem, is that if someone generates bad XML, puts it on the clipboard and tries to paste it, and then just something doesn't show up, there may not be any error going back to, we weren't expecting bad XML on the clipboard, or you may get an error. That's the error handling is probably where what I say would be probably what's missing. Not that you can actually put bad stuff in there, you just may not know what failed or what didn't go in, or like one parameter wasn't set because it was invalid. So I don't know how good the error reporting of bad XML on the clipboard is being handled at this point. But
it does seem to work well. And I would just say send good XML. The other part of the question wasn't really a question. It was just like, first off, this is my favorite feature in the FileMaker platform, the ability to kind of copy and paste code around and code generate and stuff like that. So it's not really a question. It's like, well, hey, what's next? What's next? Because you did custom menus. You did them as plain text, which I thought was very, very interesting. And layouts, table occurrences, privilege sets. But anyway, my favorite feature. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no, the goal was to be able to reproduce the entire file from XML, that you'd be able to, create a FileMaker file from just raw XML, the complete thing.
Awesome.
We do run into some problems with privileges and with, how to handle usernames, passwords, and like Rick mentioned that, when you're talking to Studio, there's a token, we have an API token that we embed in there. And, how do we show that or not show that, or how would we allow you to set that type of stuff? And that part is still under discussion, and I guess we kind of just punted on that recently because there's a lot of other stuff like making sure all the valueless stuff work, all the custom menu stuff work, and all the file options and other things that aren't quite in there yet. I think we're working on trying to fold represent how we in FileMaker. Every time you store an image into a library catalog, we ref count it and stuff like that. But unfortunately, when we spit all that stuff, if you use the same image on 16 layouts, right now you get 16 copies of that image in the XML. And I don't know what version it is. I know there's codes, I don't know whether it's finished or not, but I remember seeing float by the stream of Jira tickets I look at every day. Of being able to, do that reference counting so we don't blow up the XML. If you put this one big image on all your layouts, that you won't have that same copy all over the place. That we'll be moving these images into a new section in the XML that will just have the image once, and that'll be referenced from the other XML, much like how it's actually done in FileMaker.
Hey, very cool. You mentioned the file options as, and by the way, the big picture approach that you're taking to get the XML standardized across the different use cases. Obviously, that's spot on. You did mention an attribute of the file, which is the file options, and I'm going to drop a link into the chat. People can save it with the ... There's a post on one of the community boards or whatever, FM Soup actually, about the set before hosting. That would be a big bump on developer productivity if you had the ability to kind of flip those flags without dehosting across a multi-file solution. That'd be huge. But anyway, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, and actually on the XML, yeah, there's even internal arguments about what should be in the XML, and I think we are going to have like two different versions of it, like a verbose version and a more minimal version of just what FileMaker needs to recreate stuff. The verbose version is needed like by Vince and the other people that write these tools that want more information, like stuff that was wrong, stuff, or, like if the reference is missing. Like right now, we don't write it out if it's missing because we don't have anything to set it to if it went back in. But people writing analysis tools for databases want to know when things are missing so they can point out errors to users and stuff like that. That's one of the things I do agree with Vince on. There's more things to help, parse some of the calculations and stuff like that. So when you do save as XML, we still working on what the UI is going to look like, but there'll probably be some type of choice of whether to store out stuff that is really designed for actual just construction and destruction of FileMaker files. It's not for consumption for analysis, basically. So there'll be a form of XML for analysis and a form of XML for just, pasting, into, there's no need to paste in, generate all this XML with this extra information that FileMaker is just going to ignore anyway. So, why does pasting take such a long time to paste? I guess I would know which type of objects those are. You send in an example or something like that.
Is there a list of bug fixes in 2023 V2? It says here there were recommended using V2, and
well, the only big one was for the new script triggers. There was something that was doing actually absolutely something wrong for if you were using the new feature and were trying to get a script. I forget what part it was. But if you weren't using the new script trigger feature, that's what V2 was really pushed out for, was that one thing that was doing something absolutely wrong, as opposed to, little GUI fixes and other bug fixes. But that was
a real bug.
Remember, yeah, that was, and that was just something that was new to V1. It wasn't. Well, it was a new feature. The script transaction features. I think calcs weren't being executed a certain way. I forget what the actual bug was, but that's why that's why we made that recommendation that if you're using V1, really upgrade to V2 because of that.
I think the bug was that you couldn't close a window with the transaction still going.
Or yeah, something like that. Yeah, we broke window closing. Okay, that was it. Yeah.
So Clay, I can and paste the link into the chat. The bug fix list.
Oh, okay.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Also, it's sometimes kind of hard to figure out, because we have these lists of all these bugs that were fixed, but it's kind of hard to then track of when were they introduced, because sometimes there's bugs we're fixing were things that were never actually released to customers. So I guess if you're on the ETS, I guess we have a new tagging system and all these JIRA tickets saying that, is this something, do we report as a bug that was fixed, but it was only seen by people that may have used an earlier version in ETS, and it wasn't ever seen by a shipping version of FileMaker. And then we have to make sure that those bug fixes get stripped out of the final release notes because they don't apply, because, it was never a shipping version of it. But just bug tracking in general can get pretty complex. And then sometimes, there's a bug fix for a bug fix. So, how do you need to collapse that down so that it's really only one issue in the layout, as opposed to having to read through the entire log. I mean, if you see JIRA and stuff like that, it's basically logs are, when you're checking in code with Git and stuff like that. To really see what happens, you have to go back in time and look at how this was changed by the previous thing that was changed by the previous thing. And we try to simplify our release notes so you don't actually have to worry about that so much. But sometimes things get lost in the translation of trying to simplify, so you don't have to go, oh, look at the previous release. We fixed number 14 in the previous release note, and then you have to go back to the previous. Okay, what was item 14 in the previous release note? But that's what we have to do inside the company. But we try to, our IT department tries to simplify things a little bit and make it more usable for, so you don't have to do that stuff.
I don't know if you saw the presentation that earlier today, where we saw AI generate FileMaker code, structure, and analysis of data. And if you have any comments on that, any thoughts about all those ideas?
I know we have a group of people all thinking about that stuff, and I just don't have enough space in my brain to hold the AI in addition to everything else I'm working on right now. So that's like one of the topics I've been just, ignoring inside the company right now. there's, I've been trying to follow more. Yeah, I can't say what my bosses has me looking at other new technologies, not the AI stuff. So I'm ramping up, filling my my brain space with that information now. And I think Wade has the AI more on his brain than I do. So, yeah.
But I cannot say anything right now. So any particular quick question and I joined late, so I didn't see the demo presentation. So any feedback you can share with us?
Well, I think this is getting recorded, right? This present. Yeah. So Wade, you should probably go back and then watch it when it gets posted.
Sure. Yeah, but I think
Wade, I gave the earlier presentation, so I can probably just give you a bit of info on what I showed.
Okay.
What I showed was using ChatGPT to generate. It was a very basic example of generating FileMaker schema, updating the FileMaker schema using the OData API. So it was at that point it was quite basic. I didn't generate FileMaker scripts because that's not something that I've not really seen that's something that I would be able to manage to do in any kind of reliable manner, the way it's structured at the moment. But it was more the schema side, and what's capable through the OData API specifically. The other example I gave was generating the XML snippet structure. So I kind of passed in an example and then asked OpenAI to generate. I sort of basically described the data structure I wanted, and then said, "Can you build me an XML snippet?"
I see.
For that. So that's kind of the extent of it. So that's what I demoed.
I see. Yeah, great. Thank you for the summarizing.
Okay.
Yeah, if we could get ChatGPT to understand our XML completely, then just give me a FileMaker file that does this, and then boom, right? It'll just be. Of course, they'll lie to you half the time. So.
Yes.
That was what we came to after that.
Or a smart tool to help debug scripts or to generate script steps and on both ends, help generate script steps, but also to debug and review what we write.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like something that Vince will be able to sell you next year.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob, I use ChatGPT to create my scripts. I've been doing it for quite a while. And, sometimes it makes mistakes, but it really gives you a good starting point, a quick, good starting point.
Well, it just sounds like something FileMaker, FMI not Claris, might be interested in.
Clay, could I just make a comment? Being a FileMaker developer for, 25, 30 years, and Dave said this appropriately, is that we don't know how Claris views us as a group, and we run a business. So when we see all these new releases of, Studio, we sometimes don't have the bandwidth or desire, because we have to make a profit, to spend our time trying new things, and it seems like it's scattered, and we just have to do a job. And we use FileMaker because it's an amazing application to create solutions for our clients. And most of them are everybody's usually very happy with the results, because it's a rapid deployment system, and we can create solutions quickly. And there's always bugs and problems. One of my biggest problems now is a client that just grew too big. And, we had 160 users, and that's become an issue. So I hope Ubuntu can solve that problem. But I don't know how Claris views us, how important we are to the ecosystem, but we out there in the front line, creating solutions for our clients every day. So
you guys are the ecosystem. I mean, that's how we see it. Without you, we don't exist. It's as simple as that. I've been here for a while. I was a developer before I came here. I can tell you that the entire company at the exec level is coming to understand that in a way that's never been understood before. So it's quite an evolution in a way, to acknowledge that we're not for, as much for the guy in overalls or a dog running down the beach, but for people who are solving real problems for real businesses, right? And that's their real expertise. And our product does nothing. You're the missing ingredient. I mean, that's literally the way we see it. So, you might not always feel that, but it is genuine.
Yeah, like you mentioned, well, I guess Rick talked about the upper executives, but my boss, Lucy Chen, is a very big FileMaker. She's like one of the biggest FileMaker stalwarts inside the upper management inside FileMaker, and she's fighting all these other people, saying, why are you doing this? We need to concentrate on that too. So she's been one of the people. She started this whole Ring Zero program that we have inside FileMaker, looking at specific customers, trying to get different customers from different areas and stuff like that, and seeing what their problems are. And she's one of the ones that are she's really fully concentrating only on FileMaker and stuff like that. I have to kind of span more of the world of the Claris, so I'm trying to figure out how to get all these different things to get integrated and stuff like that. But she's really pushing that stuff. Even Wade's not too much, isn't touching these other parts of Claris. I'm kind of the one getting spread thin across all the entire cloud, the entire platform. Wade gets to concentrate mainly just in the FileMaker stuff, so he's not quote wasting his time on these other new. Well, I mean, he's working on AI. I mean, it depends whether you think AI is a waste or not. I mean, people are very diverse. I personally am not that terribly interested in AI because there's so many other things to worry about. But I know it's the big thing out there. It's finally gotten to the point where people have found it useful. So now it's time to take advantage of it. Yeah.
Hey, Clay, it sounds like your boss is out there fighting the good fight and helping us, even if we don't know it. How can we help her help us? Really, what can we do to help her?
Help keep her stay sane, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to ask her that. I'll ask her next week. What help do you need? What could help her out? I really should think about her a little bit more too. I know she protects me from a lot of stuff, which is really nice, but I guess I really need to worry about it and help protect her from other things too. So yeah,
Lucy protects Clay from me.
Okay. That's true. She's told you no sometimes too. So but yeah, no, see how you guys can help her. Yeah, let me talk to her about that. I need to write that down.
Hey, can I slip in one question before you guys go? Clay, this is something we talked a little bit about, record ID. This once again comes up in the community. There's there's an under the hood thing called a record ID. I think everybody knows that. And there's developers who expose it through a calculation field and maybe through a script, whatever, but a calculation field, maybe stored, maybe unstored, maybe both. And there's Chris Irvine, for example, wrote a blog post where he proposed that using I forget whether it was stored or unstored, record ID field would be an optimum architecture for sorting a portal. Most of us have portals. Often we sort them. It's a bit of a bread and butter feature. Somebody gets a drink when I say that phrase. Is that indeed, I think you said something about the HBAN level, HBAN, which you mentioned in one of your under the hood sessions, is using record ID for sorting portals and or gathering a list of record IDs to store a found set of records and perhaps save it and send it. Is that indeed an optimized architecture because it uses record IDs? in your opinion?
Well, once you reference the ID and like start putting in other calcs and stuff like that, it's pretty much disconnected from how it could be used optimally. So if you're using an unsorted calcs, it's not really any better than like using your primary key and stuff like that. And actually, I remember early on I was like promoting, oh, use record IDs for everything, until we started getting into the sync world, where you find out that record IDs can't travel between multiple tables properly. So you really need a primary key instead. And then I'll get into arguments of what a primary key should be in that stuff. But so I guess using the record ID directly, I mean, referencing things by record ID when you're going through other APIs, like the FileMaker Data API, is definitely the fastest way to get to a record, if you have the record ID and you're accessing it that way. But once you're inside FileMaker in the scripting engine and stuff like that, there's not much you can do there to take advantage of the performance improvements or the nativeness of the record ID. I mean, we have talked about in the scripting engine being, give you the ability to have, to manipulate found sets or save off a found set and say restore a found set. And internally, we would be storing all these record IDs. Actually, we really even wouldn't be storing the record IDs. We'd be using what Wade was talking about earlier about these large bitmaps, which are sparse bitmaps of record IDs. So they're not even being represented by numbers, they're being represented by bits. And using the new hardware acceleration stuff makes that stuff faster. That's where like queries can get a little bit faster, because they're not using the hardware acceleration for doing ORing or ANDing when you're doing queries and stuff like that. That's where that happens. But that's all, unless you're using the APIs where you can actually pass in the record ID to actually do a particular amount of work, which I know the FMData API is that way. I don't know if OData exposes that direct access or not, but that's the only real place where developers can actually take advantage of the speed improvement for that.
Hey, Clay, quick follow. First off, thank you for the caveat about the record IDs not being persistent across files, and certainly not across time and space, because they're ephemeral. That said, I would only, and I do, use them for session-based scripting, because they are consistent across a given session. That was number one. I use them partly because they're lightweight versus a UUID. UUIDs are awesome. So are record IDs, depends on the use case. And then I would say the restoring of the found set, the record ID is under the hood in the snapshot link. So that's kind of interesting.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess snapshot links do go by record ID. So that means it's still, that's like you mentioned, ephemeral. That means as long as you're still talking to the same, you're not talking to a clone of the file that had the, had the data transferred over from one table to the other, then that would actually break.
Yeah. I mean, so that's a fair warning for anyone who's going to like go here and do that. But session based, it is rock solid. Seems fast.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, all right, good answer. I'm going to watch the recording.
Actually, I guess one thing where it is not even, it may not be consistent, is when we're doing ESS. If you're using SQL tables as a data source table, we're doing all this crazy mapping between record IDs and primary keys, and just even connecting to the backend data source, you may get a different record for the same record ID if you're talking to ESS sources. So that'd be the one dangerous place of using record IDs, is if you're talking to a SQL backend, especially a SQL backend that doesn't have, I think Oracle is nice because they have a concept of a record ID that we do a direct mapping to. Whereas the other ones, we have to build a mapping between our concept of a record ID and whatever the combination of fields are that constitute the primary key for that record. That's one reason why ESS isn't the fastest, because we have to do all this. The concept of record ID doesn't really exist in all SQL databases.
Another place to watch out.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Actually, I'm not even sure how long this talk was supposed to go today.
Yeah, I think we're at time, actually. So this is probably a good place to end it. I would like to thank all the folks from Claris and Ian for doing your presentations. Everyone really appreciates it when you guys come here, as you can tell by all the questions asked. And there's a ton of stuff in the chat. So if you guys feel so inclined, feel free to hang on to the chat. And if you want to share anything else, please do. Rosemary, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a plea one more time about a little bit up in the chat. I said, please fill out our survey. It does two things. One, it helps us know what you're interested in from a presentation standpoint. And also, if you tell us that this is valuable, it's easier to come back.
Could I get a show of hands from people who thought this was valuable?
It'd be easier to do a show of who didn't think it was valuable.
Yeah, so just ask is complete the survey and let us know so we can come back.
Okay,
great job, guys.
I'm going to end the meeting then. So thanks everybody for coming.
Thank
Thanks
you
for the show.
Thanks all.